There is a truth so powerful, yet so simple, that many have overlooked it. It is not hidden in mystery, nor reserved for a select few. It is written plainly, declared boldly, and made available to every believer. By his stripes I am healed. Not I will be healed, not I hope to be healed, but I am healed. The question is not whether God is willing. The question is, will you believe what he has already said? Because God's word is not just information, it is medicine. And when taken correctly, it produces life, health, and restoration in every part of your being. Healing is not something that God is deciding about today, nor is it something he is withholding until the right moment. It is not based on how you feel, how long you have been suffering, or how serious the condition appears. Healing has already been settled. It was not left unfinished, and it was not left uncertain. It was completed through the redemptive work of Jesus, and that means it exists right now as a present reality, not a future possibility. Many people approach healing as if they must persuade God to move on their behalf. They pray repeatedly, asking again and again, hoping that one day God will choose to respond. But this way of thinking keeps them in a place of waiting instead of receiving. If something has already been provided, you don't need to convince the giver. You simply need to take what has been made available. The issue is never on God's side. It is always on the side of understanding and believing what has already been done. When you begin to see healing as something already accomplished, your entire perspective shifts. You stop striving and you start trusting. You stop begging and you start believing. Instead of focusing on symptoms, you focus on the promise. Instead of measuring your condition by what you feel in your body, you measure it by what has been declared in the Word. That is where faith begins to rise, because faith is rooted in what is already finished, not in what is still uncertain. The foundation of this truth is that the work of redemption was complete. Nothing was left undone. Just as forgiveness of sins is not something you earn, but something you receive, healing follows the same principle. It is part of the same finished work. You would not say, I hope someday I will be forgiven. If you have already believed, you would say, I am forgiven. In the same way, healing is not something you push into the future. It is something you accept as already yours. This understanding removes confusion and brings clarity. It takes healing out of the realm of chance and places it into the realm of certainty. It is no longer about whether God will act. It is about aligning yourself with what has already been done. Your role is not to create healing, but to receive it, not to struggle for it, but to stand on it, not to question it, but to agree with it. And when you truly settle this in your heart, that healing has already been provided, you begin to respond differently. Your words change. Your thinking changes. Your expectations change. You no longer speak as someone trying to get healed. You speak as someone who already has it, even if the physical evidence has not yet caught up with the truth. You are holding on to faith does not wait for visible proof before it speaks. It does not rely on physical evidence to confirm what is true. Instead, it is anchored in something far more certain than feelings or appearances. It is anchored in what God has already said. That means faith begins where the senses end. When the body says one thing and the Word says another, faith chooses to agree with the Word and gives it a voice, even when everything around seems to contradict it. Most people are trained to speak based on what they see and feel. If they feel pain, they talk about the pain. If symptoms increase, they speak about how bad things have become. But faith operates in the opposite direction. Faith speaks first, and then it sees. It does not deny the existence of symptoms, but it refuses to give them authority. It recognizes that what is seen is temporary, but what is spoken from the Word has the power to change what is seen. There is a spiritual law at work here. Your words are containers of belief. Whatever you consistently say reveals what you truly believe on the inside. If your words are filled with doubt, fear, and uncertainty, they will reinforce those very conditions. But if your words are filled with truth, confidence, and assurance, they begin to shape your reality in alignment with that truth. This is why speaking is not a small thing. It is a central part of how faith functions. Faith Faith-filled words are not empty repetitions. They are not attempts to convince yourself of something untrue. They are declarations that come from a settled conviction within. Even if that conviction starts small, it grows stronger every time you speak in agreement with the word. At first, it may feel unnatural to say, "I am healed," when your body is telling you otherwise. But as you continue, something begins to shift on the inside. Your spirit aligns with the truth, and your confidence begins to rise. It is important to understand that faith does not come after seeing results. It produces results. If you wait until you feel better before you speak differently, you are not operating in faith. You are simply responding to circumstances. Faith steps out ahead of the evidence. It declares the outcome before it is visible. It calls things as they should be, not as they currently are. This is where many people miss it. They think they must feel faith before they speak, but faith is often released through speaking. As you continue to declare what the Word says, even in the presence of contrary evidence, your heart becomes established. Your mind begins to renew. Your expectation begins to change. And slowly but surely, what you have been speaking starts to manifest outwardly, because you have aligned your words with a higher truth that does not change based on circumstances. God's Word is not just meant to be read occasionally or quoted in moments of need. It is designed to be taken in consistently, deliberately, and personally, just like medicine. When a person is given medicine, they are instructed to take it daily, sometimes multiple times a day, regardless of how they feel in the moment. They do not wait until symptoms worsen to take it, and they do not stop taking it the moment they feel slight improvement. They follow a steady, disciplined intake because they trust that the medicine is working within them, even when they cannot immediately see or feel the results. In the same way, the Word must be received into your spirit on a continual basis. It is not enough to hear it once or to agree with it mentally. It must be fed into your inner being repeatedly until it begins to take root. Just as natural medicine enters the body and starts working beneath the surface, the Word enters your spirit and begins to bring life, restoration, and alignment from the inside out. This process is not always instant, but it is always effective when it is applied consistently. Many people approach the Word casually, taking it only when they feel desperate or overwhelmed. They treat it as a last resort rather than a daily necessity. But spiritual health, just like physical health, is maintained through regular intake. When the Word becomes a part of your daily life, when you read it, speak it, meditate on it, and hold on to it throughout the day, it begins to shape your thinking, influence your beliefs, and strengthen your inner man. There is also a right way to take this medicine. It is not just about reading words on a page. It is about giving them your full attention. It is about allowing those words to sink deep into your heart, where they can produce results. When you meditate on the Word, you are not just repeating it, you are turning it over in your mind, considering it, and allowing it to become more real to you than anything else. This is where transformation begins, because what you continually focus on will eventually dominate your thinking. As this spiritual medicine is taken in, it begins to push out fear, doubt, and uncertainty. It replaces wrong thinking with truth. It builds a foundation that cannot easily be shaken by circumstances. Over time, the Word becomes the first thing you turn to, not the last. It becomes your source of strength, your place of stability, and your answer in every situation. And just like natural medicine must be taken according to instruction to be effective, the Word must be applied with consistency and intention. Skipping doses, taking it lightly, or treating it as optional limits its effect. But when it is given priority, when it is taken daily without interruption, it begins to produce life in every area it touches, working quietly yet powerfully within, until what is on the inside starts becoming visible on the outside. Words are not merely sounds that fade into the air. They are carriers of belief, and they give direction to what is happening within you. What you continually confess shapes the reality you live in, because your confession is the outward expression of what you have accepted inwardly. It is not enough to simply believe something quietly in your heart. while speaking something completely different with your mouth. There must be agreement between what you believe and what you say, because it is that agreement that releases the power of faith. Many people desire healing, and they may even believe that it is possible, yet their daily speech contradicts that belief. They talk about how bad they feel, how long the condition has lasted, and how unlikely change seems to be. Without realizing it, they are reinforcing the very thing they want to overcome. Their words become aligned with the problem instead of the promise, and as a result, they remain stuck in the same cycle. Confession is not about pretending that symptoms do not exist, nor is it about denying what you feel in your body. It is about choosing which voice you will agree with. There is always a choice between speaking what is seen and speaking what has been declared. When you choose to speak in line with the Word, you are aligning yourself with a higher truth that has the power to override what is temporary. There is a consistency required in this process. One or two positive statements spoken occasionally will not produce lasting results if they are constantly canceled out by words of doubt and fear. Your confession must become a daily habit, something you return to again and again until it becomes natural. At first, it may feel like you are going against everything your senses are telling you, but over time, your words begin to shape your thinking, and your thinking begins to influence what you expect. Confession also strengthens your inner conviction. The more you say something in agreement with the Word, the more real it becomes to you. It moves from being something you hope is true to something you are convinced is true. And once that conviction is established, your words carry even greater authority, because they are no longer just repeated phrases. They are backed by a deep, settled belief. It is through this steady, unwavering confession that faith is released. Words spoken in alignment with truth begin to work like seeds planted in fertile ground. They take root beneath the surface, and even when nothing seems to be changing outwardly, something is happening internally. Over time, what has been consistently spoken begins to manifest, because your confession has been activating and sustaining the very thing you have been declaring from the beginning. Doubt is subtle, but it is powerful in the way it interferes with what faith is trying to produce. It does not always come as open disbelief. Often it shows up as hesitation, uncertainty, or double-minded thinking. A person may say they believe, yet at the same time entertain thoughts that contradict what they are believing for. This inner conflict creates a barrier, not because the promise has changed, but because the heart is divided between two opposing directions. Faith requires agreement, a settled confidence that does not shift back and forth based on circumstances. But doubt introduces instability. One moment there is confidence, and the next moment there is questioning. One day there is strong declaration, and the next day there is discouragement and negative speech. This inconsistency weakens the effectiveness of faith because it keeps pulling the mind and heart in opposite directions. What makes doubt particularly limiting is that it often feels reasonable. It points to visible symptoms, past experiences, and natural outcomes as evidence. It suggests that it is simply being realistic, but faith does not operate on what is considered reasonable in the natural sense. It operates on what has been declared as truth, regardless of how things appear. When doubt is entertained, it elevates circumstances above that truth, giving more weight to what is seen than to what has been promised. Doubt also affects the words that are spoken. When uncertainty fills the mind, it eventually comes out through speech. A person may begin by declaring truth, but if doubt is allowed to linger, their words start to shift. They begin to speak in ways that contradict their earlier confession, and this contradiction cancels out the consistency that faith requires. It is not just what you say occasionally that matters, but what you say consistently over time. There is also a connection between doubt and focus. Whatever you continually give your attention to will grow stronger in your thinking. If your attention remains fixed on symptoms, reports, and negative possibilities, doubt will naturally increase. But if your attention is redirected to truth, through reading, meditating, and speaking, it begins to replace that doubt with confidence. The mind cannot stay filled with opposing thoughts indefinitely. One will eventually dominate. Overcoming doubt is not about forcing yourself to ignore reality, but about choosing which reality you will give authority to. It involves guarding your thoughts, being intentional about what you listen to, and being disciplined in what you allow yourself to dwell on. As you continue to focus on truth and speak in agreement with it, doubt begins to lose its hold, and the inner conflict starts to settle into a place of stability, where faith can operate without resistance. Meditation is more than simply reading words repeatedly. It is a deliberate and focused engagement with truth until it becomes alive within you. It involves taking what has been written and turning it over in your mind again and again, allowing it to sink deeper than surface-level understanding. Many people read quickly, moving from one passage to another, but never pause long enough for what they are reading to truly take root. As a result, the word remains intellectual knowledge, instead of becoming a living reality inside them. When you meditate, you slow down. You give your full attention to what is being said. You begin to picture it, to personalize it, to speak it quietly to yourself, and to think about how it applies directly to your life. This process creates a connection between your mind and your spirit, where truth moves beyond information and becomes revelation. Revelation is what brings clarity and certainty. It is the moment when something you have read many times suddenly becomes real to you in a way it never has before. This kind of understanding cannot be rushed. It develops over time through consistent focus. As you continue to meditate on the same truths, they begin to shape the way you think. Old patterns of thought that were built on fear, doubt, or past experiences start to lose their influence. In their place, new patterns begin to form, patterns that are aligned with truth rather than circumstances. This transformation does not happen overnight, but it happens steadily as you remain engaged with the Word. Meditation also strengthens your inner image. What you continually think about becomes the picture you carry within you. If that picture is filled with weakness, sickness, or limitation, it will affect how you speak and how you act. But when you meditate on truth, a new image begins to form, one that reflects wholeness, strength, and restoration. This inner image becomes the foundation for your expectations, and your expectations influence the direction of your life. Another important aspect of meditation is that it keeps truth at the forefront of your mind. Throughout the day, there are many voices competing for your attention: circumstances, opinions, reports, and past experiences. Without intentional focus, these voices can easily dominate your thinking. But meditation acts as a way of anchoring your mind, bringing you back again and again to what is unchanging. It keeps you grounded, even when everything around you feels unstable. As you continue in this practice, something begins to shift internally. What once felt distant becomes close. What once felt uncertain becomes clear. There is a growing sense of assurance that does not depend on external conditions. The Word becomes more than something you read. It becomes something you know, something you rely on, and something that shapes your responses in every situation. There is a difference between agreeing with something and actually acting on it. Many people hear the truth, understand it to a certain degree, and even say they believe it, but their actions remain unchanged. Faith, however, is not complete until it moves beyond words and begins to express itself through action. What you do consistently reveals what you truly believe, because belief naturally produces corresponding action. Acting on the Word means you begin to live in alignment with what has been declared, even when there is no visible evidence to support it yet. It requires stepping out of the comfort of what is familiar and responding to truth as if it is already established. This is where faith becomes practical. It is no longer just something spoken. It becomes something lived out in daily decisions, attitudes, and behaviors. For example, if you truly accept that healing has been provided, your actions will begin to reflect that acceptance. You will no longer carry yourself as someone defeated or hopeless. There will be a shift in how you approach each day, in how you respond to challenges, and in how you carry yourself mentally and physically. This does not mean ignoring symptoms. but it means refusing to let those symptoms dictate your actions or define your identity. Action also reinforces belief. When you take steps that align with truth, it strengthens your confidence in that truth. Each act of obedience, no matter how small, builds momentum. It moves what you believe from theory into experience. Without action, belief can remain passive and weak, easily shaken by circumstances. But when belief is put into motion, it becomes active and resilient. There is also a timing aspect involved. Acting on the word does not mean waiting until everything feels right or until all doubts have disappeared. Often, action must come first. It requires a decision to move forward based on what you know, not based on what you feel. Feelings can change and circumstances can shift, but truth remains constant. Acting on that truth, even in the presence of uncertainty, is what allows it to produce tangible results. Consistency plays a major role here as well. One action taken once may not seem significant, but repeated actions build a pattern. Over time, that pattern establishes a new way of living. It creates a lifestyle that is aligned with truth rather than circumstances. This consistency is what allows results to develop, because it keeps you moving in the same direction, instead of starting and stopping based on how things appear in the moment. As you continue to act in alignment with the Word, something begins to take place beneath the surface. There is a steady progression, even if it is not immediately visible. Your thinking becomes more stable, your confidence becomes stronger, and your responses become more consistent. What started as a deliberate choice gradually becomes a natural way of living, where your actions and your beliefs are no longer in conflict, but are working together in harmony. Consistency is what carries faith from a moment of inspiration into a lifestyle that produces lasting results. It is not what you do occasionally that brings change, but what you do continually over time. Many people experience brief moments of strong belief, where they speak the right words, think the right thoughts, and feel confident about what they are expecting. But when those moments are not maintained, they fade, and old patterns begin to take over again. Faith is not designed to function in bursts. It is designed to function as a steady flow. It requires a daily commitment to remain aligned with truth, regardless of how circumstances may shift. This means that what you speak, what you think, and what you focus on cannot be dependent on how you feel in the moment. Feelings can change quickly, but consistency keeps you grounded in something unchanging. One of the greatest challenges people face is maintaining the same level of conviction when they do not see immediate results. It is easy to stay consistent when there are visible signs of progress, but when things seem unchanged, there is a tendency to relax, to question, or to go back to old ways of thinking and speaking. This is where consistency becomes most important. It is the decision to continue, even when there is no outward evidence, trusting that what has been planted is still working beneath the surface. Consistency also protects what has already been established. When you have built a level of belief through speaking, meditating, and acting on the Word, inconsistency can begin to weaken that foundation. Just as steady input strengthens your inner conviction, inconsistent input can slowly erode it. This is why it is important to guard your routine, what you listen to, what you say, and what you dwell on daily, because these things either reinforce or undermine what you are believing. There is a cumulative effect that comes with consistency. Each day of staying aligned with truth adds to the previous day. It may not seem significant in the moment, but over time it creates a strong, stable foundation that is not easily shaken. This steady buildup is what allows manifestation to be sustained, because it is not based on temporary emotion or short-lived effort, but on a pattern that has been firmly established. Consistency also brings clarity. When you remain focused over time, distractions lose their influence. Confusion begins to fade, and your direction becomes more defined. You are no longer reacting to every change in circumstance, but instead, you are anchored in a truth that does not change. This stability allows you to move forward with confidence without constantly guessing or shifting your position. As this pattern continues, what once required effort begins to feel natural. Speaking truth becomes your default response. Thinking in alignment with the Word becomes your normal pattern. Acting in faith becomes your instinct rather than a struggle. This transformation is not the result of a single moment, but of consistent alignment over time, where every day you choose to stay in agreement with what has already been established until it becomes fully expressed in every area of your life. There is a significant difference between striving to obtain something and simply receiving what has already been given. Striving is rooted in the idea that something is still out of reach, that more effort, more pleading, or more struggle is required before it can become yours. Receiving, on the other hand, is based on the understanding that the provision has already been made, and your role is to accept it rather than to earn it. Many people unknowingly approach healing with a mindset of striving. They feel as though they must do more to qualify, more to prove themselves, or more to convince God to respond. This creates a cycle of effort without rest, where they are constantly trying, but never fully arriving at a place of peace. Their focus remains on what they are doing rather than on what has already been done. Receiving shifts that focus entirely. It brings you to a place where you recognize that the work is complete and there is nothing left to add to it. This does not mean that there is no responsibility on your part, but your responsibility is different. It is to believe, to accept, and to align yourself with what has already been provided. Instead of working towards something, you begin to rest in it, trusting that it is already yours. This kind of rest is not passive, it is active trust. It is a settled confidence that does not feel the need to struggle or force results. When you are striving, there is often tension, an underlying pressure that says things must change immediately or something is wrong. But when you are receiving, there is a sense of calm assurance. You are no longer trying to make something happen. You are allowing what has already been established to unfold. Striving often leads to frustration, especially when results are not immediate. It causes a person to question whether they are doing enough or doing it correctly. But receiving removes that uncertainty. It brings clarity, because it is no longer about performance, it is about position. You are not trying to reach a place where healing becomes available. You are accepting that you are already in that place. This mindset also affects how you respond to challenges. When symptoms persist or circumstances do not change right away, striving reacts with increased effort and sometimes discouragement. Receiving, however, remains steady. It does not panic or retreat, because it is not dependent on immediate evidence. It continues to hold to what is already true, regardless of what is seen or felt. There is also a simplicity in receiving that removes unnecessary complication. It does not require perfect understanding or flawless execution. It simply requires a willing heart that says, "I accept what has been given." This acceptance becomes the foundation for everything else. Your words, your thoughts, and your actions all begin to flow from this place of assurance rather than uncertainty. As this understanding deepens, the inner struggle begins to fade. The constant sense of trying gives way to a quiet confidence. You are no longer chasing after something that feels distant. You are embracing something that is already present, allowing it to take its place in your life as you continue to remain in agreement with it. Words are far more than mere expressions or sounds. They are containers of life and death, channels through which faith is released or blocked. What you speak has the power to shape your reality, influence your circumstances, and determine the direction of your life. Every word carries weight because it reflects the condition of your heart and either aligns you with God's promises or distances you from them. The moment you begin to understand the power of words, you begin to realize that speaking is not just a habit. It is a spiritual act that produces results. Many people underestimate the significance of what they say. They allow casual speech, complaints, and negative expressions to flow freely, never recognizing that these words are planting seeds that will eventually grow. Words spoken in doubt, fear, or frustration reinforce the very conditions they wish to overcome. On the other hand, words spoken in faith, in agreement with truth, and in alignment with God's word set in motion forces that begin to bring that truth into manifestation. This is why careful attention to speech is not optional. It is essential. The power of words is evident in the way they connect belief to action. Speaking the word aloud does more than declare truth. It strengthens the faith that resides in your spirit. When you continually confess what God has said, it begins to build conviction within you. That conviction then drives action, sustains persistence, and maintains focus on what is true, even in the midst of contrary circumstances. Words are like spiritual seeds. What you plant in your mouth, your heart, and your mind will eventually bear fruit. It is also important to recognize that words can operate both for and against you simultaneously. You may hear the truth, you may know the promises, yet if your speech is inconsistent or negative, it cancels out the effectiveness of faith. Faith requires agreement, and agreement comes when what is in your heart is consistent with what is coming out of your mouth. Your words are the bridge between unseen reality and seen manifestation. They carry the force that allows faith to move from possibility into reality. Speaking in faith is not always easy, especially when physical evidence seems to contradict what you are declaring. Your senses may tell you one story, but the Word tells you another. Choosing to speak according to the Word, in spite of what you see or feel, is what separates passive hope from active faith. This conscious alignment of speech with truth begins to shift not only your mindset, but also the spiritual atmosphere around you. The consistency of words matters more than occasional declarations. Repeated, daily confession of truth strengthens the spirit, reinforces belief, and produces a cumulative effect that is unstoppable over time. Words are not just reflections of faith, they are instruments that release and sustain faith. They hold creative power, and when used in alignment with God's Word, they begin to reshape your life, heal your body, restore your mind, and bring victory into every area that has been challenged by circumstances. Healing is not something we chase, it is something we receive. It is not found in effort, struggle, or persuasion. It is already provided, purchased by the finished work, and waiting for us to take hold of it. Faith speaks before it sees. Words carry authority, and consistent confession releases the power of the promises into our lives. The Word is our medicine. Meditation deepens revelation, and acting on truth transforms belief into reality. Doubt may try to interfere, but when we choose to align our thoughts, words, and actions with what has already been established, manifestation becomes inevitable. The journey of healing is not about waiting on circumstances or appearances. It is about standing firm in what has been spoken, taking in the Word daily, confessing it boldly, and walking in agreement with it. Each moment of agreement strengthens faith, each declaration reinforces truth, and each step taken in alignment with God's promises brings the unseen into the seen. Healing is a present reality, and the only question that remains is whether we will believe it, receive it, and live in it consistently. When we fully embrace these principles, what once seemed impossible begins to unfold. The power of God's Word as medicine works silently yet powerfully within, transforming hearts, minds, and bodies. By His stripes we are healed, not someday, not eventually, but now. Faith becomes our bridge, words become our instruments, and consistent alignment with truth produces results that cannot be shaken. Healing is ours because it has already been provided, and it is released the moment we agree with it and act in faith.